Have you ever wondered why some women seem to hold up the world even when everything inside them feels like it is breaking? Why their strength doesn't collapse under pressure? Why their faith doesn't fade even when life keeps demanding more than they have to give? If you are that woman, or if you carry the quiet suspicion that God has kept you standing when everything around you should have made you fall, then this message is speaking directly into the core of your spirit. Because there are battles you never chose, responsibilities you never asked for, and storms you never announced, yet somehow you remain the pillar holding up pieces of a world that would have shattered without you. This is the hidden truth. A woman does not hold up her world because she is naturally strong. She holds it up because God reinforces her from within. There is a divine sustainment that rises in her chest when the night grows too heavy, a spiritual endurance that keeps her walking long after her heart has whispered that it is tired. And perhaps the most sacred part of this journey is that no one truly sees the weight she carries. They see her smile, but not the breaking. They hear her wisdom, but not the nights she spent praying for clarity. They admire her resilience, but know nothing of the tears she buried before dawn. The world calls it strength. Heaven calls it evidence of divine support. Every woman sustained by God lives in this tension between what people assume and what only God knows. She pushes forward, not because she feels powerful, but because surrender is not an option when others depend on her. She keeps loving even when her heart is bruised, keeps believing even when doubt scratches at her voice, keeps building even when her hands tremble from exhaustion, and deep inside, she wonders how much longer she can keep holding everything together. Yet in that private questioning, God whispers a reassurance that revives her soul. You are not carrying this alone. You were never meant to. The strength you think is yours is really mine flowing through you. And maybe you feel this right now. Maybe part of you is exhausted from being the anchor, the healer, the voice of stability in a world that rarely stops shaking. Maybe you have spent years supporting others while silently asking who supports you. This tension is not failure. It is proof that God has been lifting what you could not. You are sustained, upheld, reinforced by a presence stronger than anything you face. And as you begin to see this clearly, something shifts inside you, something that prepares the foundation for what comes next in this journey. Because understanding why God sustains you opens the door to understanding how He transforms you through the very weight you carry. Before we continue, tell me something from your heart. Have you ever felt this invisible weight pressing on your spirit in ways no one around you could understand? Comment below and share your experience, your reflection, or even your question. Your voice matters here. And while you do that, make sure to like this video and check if you are already subscribed, because what you are about to uncover may reshape how you see yourself and how you see God's role in your journey. This understanding is essential, and staying with me will help you grasp the fullness of what is coming next as we move into the deeper layers of this divine process still unfolding ahead of you. There is a kind of strength that never announces itself, a strength that grows in the quiet corners of a woman's soul, long before anyone notices she is carrying more than her heart should reasonably hold. This strength does not come from applause, acknowledgement, or recognition. It is forged in the unseen hours, built from moments where she wipes her face, steadies her breath, and chooses to rise again because life has made rising a requirement, not an option. And this is where the emotional weight begins to shape her, not in the loud storms, but in the soft, hidden battles she fights alone because she believes she must remain steady for others. Most people never understand what she holds inside. They see her functioning, not her fatigue. They see her compassion, not the depletion beneath it. They see her endurance, not the days when she silently wonders if she has anything left to give. What the world often fails to realize is that a woman sustained by God carries emotional burdens that are deeper, heavier, and more layered than what her outer calm could ever reveal. She carries the disappointments she never speaks about, the wounds she pretends no longer hurt, the unanswered prayers she still hopes will find a reply. And yet her spirit does not collapse under these weights. It stretches, expands, and keeps going in ways that defy logic. She becomes the safe place for others, even when she has no safe place for herself. She becomes the listener, even when she holds unspoken stories inside her chest. She becomes the nurturer, even when her own heart is craving rest. There is something sacred about this contradiction, something God himself watches with a kind of tenderness, because he knows the strength others praise is built on top of emotional trenches they will never see. He knows that for every encouraging word she gives, there were 10 moments where she needed encouragement herself. And still, she stands. Not because she is unbreakable, but because God reinforces every fractured part of her. And in this quiet emotional labor, something profound happens. She begins to develop an emotional resilience that is not born from toughness, but from surrender. A resilience that teaches her to carry her pain with grace, her fears with honesty, and her hope with a kind of stubbornness that refuses to die. She discovers that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep moving through it. And God meets her precisely there, in the tension between her exhaustion and her responsibility. He becomes the lift beneath her spirit, the calm beneath her storm, the assurance beneath her uncertainty. She keeps going, not because she feels ready, but because he makes her able. And as this emotional weight shapes her, it prepares her for something deeper ahead, something she can sense but cannot yet fully articulate. A shift, a revelation, a divine movement that will help her understand why God continues to sustain her in ways she still cannot explain, and why her endurance is becoming the foundation for what he is preparing to reveal in the next chapter of her journey. There comes a moment in every woman's journey when the world around her begins to crumble in ways she never anticipated. Responsibilities multiply. Pressures intensify, and suddenly everything she once managed with ease begins to feel unbearably heavy. It is in these moments when her strength seems insufficient and her heart trembles under the weight of what life has placed on her shoulders, that a deeper truth begins to emerge. Because this is the point where God steps into the very spaces that feel impossible and begins to lift her in ways no human support ever could. The collapse around her is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle, almost quiet, a disappointment she didn't see coming, a betrayal she wasn't prepared for, a door she thought would open but remained closed, a season where she feels stretched between what she must carry and what she can no longer endure. And in the middle of this quiet unraveling, something miraculous begins to take shape, something only her spirit can perceive. She begins to sense that even as her world shakes, something steady holds her from within, something unbreakable, something divine. She starts to notice that she does not fall as hard as she expected. She breaks, but she does not shatter. She bends, but she does not snap. Her mind becomes tired, yet her faith refuses to collapse. This is the evidence that God is not merely watching her struggle. He is sustaining her through it. He lifts her thoughts when anxiety tries to drown her. He lifts her hope when disappointment tries to bury her. He lifts her courage when fear whispers that she cannot continue. And even when she feels like she is losing pieces of the life she once relied on, she discovers a mysterious strength that rises in her spirit at the exact moment she needs it most. What others interpret as resilience is often divine reinforcement. They think she is strong because she keeps going, but the truth is that God keeps placing breath in her determination when her own strength runs thin. They think she is brave because she stands in the storm, but heaven knows she stands only because God has wrapped his steadiness around her trembling soul. And while the world sees a woman surviving a collapsing season, God sees a woman being positioned for revelation, elevation, and transformation. This is where her faith begins to shift. She starts to recognize that collapse does not always mean destruction. Sometimes collapse is a divine restructuring, a holy dismantling of what can no longer remain, making room for what God intends to build next. She may not understand it fully, but she feels the truth of it deep inside. Something is being stripped away, not to weaken her, but to strengthen the foundation of who she is becoming. And as she walks through this season, carried by a strength that is not her own, she begins to sense that the collapse is not the end of her story. It is the threshold of a deeper encounter with God's sustaining power, a preparation for the deeper truths he will reveal as her journey unfolds into what comes next. There comes a turning point in a woman's life when the weight she has been carrying finally reveals something she had not noticed before. For so long she believed she was standing by sheer determination, surviving by discipline, holding her world together through effort and endurance. But then, in a quiet and almost imperceptible moment, a realization begins to rise inside her like a soft dawn breaking through a long night. She starts to understand that the strength she credited to herself has never truly belonged to her. That behind every moment she refused to collapse, there was a presence holding her steady. Behind every breath she borrowed in exhaustion, there was a hand lifting her chest. Behind every step forward she took when she felt she had nothing left, there was a divine force carrying her farther than human will ever could. This realization does not appear in a dramatic revelation. It comes gently, like a whisper that brushes against the edges of her spirit, reminding her that the battles she thought she fought alone were battles God had already entered, long before she understood what she was facing. The tears she thought no one saw were collected by a God who never loses track of the hidden weight of a woman's heart. And in understanding this, something inside her begins to loosen. The internal tension that once felt like responsibility shifts into something more sacred. Dependence. A holy release. A surrender that does not weaken her but actually empowers her. She recognizes that she was never designed to carry everything by herself, that God had been reinforcing her steps long before she stumbled, that he had been opening breathing space in her spirit each time the world closed in too tightly. And with this understanding, her posture changes, not physically but spiritually. She begins to pray differently, not as a woman begging for strength, but as a woman awakening to the strength already sustaining her. She stops interpreting her endurance as a personal achievement and begins to see it as evidence of divine partnership. Her battles no longer feel like solitary mountains, but like shared terrains where God walks beside her, guiding her feet through uncertain ground. And when this truth settles deeper, her heart becomes lighter, even if her circumstances do not immediately change. She learns that she is surrounded even when she feels isolated, supported even when she feels stretched, protected even when she feels exposed. This awareness does not remove the challenges, but it reframes them. She understands that every pressure she faces is filtered through God's hands, that nothing reaches her without passing through his sovereignty first. And because of that, she finds a courage not rooted in herself, but rooted in the certainty that she is not standing in her battles as a fragile woman, but as a woman reinforced by the strength of heaven. If you have ever felt this shift inside you, this awakening to a help you did not realize was already there, share your experience in the comments. Your words may become the confirmation another heart needs to understand that she, too, is not fighting alone. Something sacred begins to unfold inside a woman when she finally understands she is not fighting her battles alone. The realization does not instantly remove the weight she carries, nor does it erase the pressures surrounding her. Instead, it starts a quiet transformation deep within her soul, a transformation that reshapes how she moves through her struggles. Pain, which once felt like an enemy, begins to serve a different purpose. It becomes a sculptor, carving out deeper strength, deeper wisdom, and a deeper sensitivity to the voice of God guiding her through what she once thought she had to navigate by herself. This transformation does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, the way dawn replaces darkness without forcing anything. She begins noticing subtle shifts in her reactions, her thoughts, her emotional endurance. Situations that once overwhelmed her now meet a calmer, steadier version of her. Not because life is suddenly easier, but because her spirit is learning to interpret hardship differently. She recognizes that the pain she experiences is not a sign of abandonment, but a space where God works on the architecture of her heart. It is in these pressured places that He expands her capacity, refines her vision, and strengthens the foundation of who she is becoming. She begins to understand that pain is not merely something to survive, but something that reveals hidden layers of her character. It uncovers wounds she once hid, exposes fears she ignored, and brings to the surface desires she never dared to admit. Instead of avoiding these revelations, she learns to face them with honesty, because she senses that God is using this inner exposure to rebuild her from the inside out. Her vulnerability no longer feels like weakness, but like a doorway to transformation. She discovers that what breaks her open is also what allows God to reach deeper places within her. This transformation shifts her perspective as well. Where she once saw obstacles, she now begins to see invitations to grow, to surrender, to trust. She realizes that God is not just sustaining her during the pain, but actively shaping her through it. Her endurance becomes more than survival. It becomes spiritual refinement. She no longer prays only for strength to get through the day. She begins to pray for clarity, for purpose, for the courage to embrace the lessons hidden within her struggles. And as she opens herself to this process, she notices that parts of her that once felt fragile now feel fortified by a strength she cannot take credit for. In this quiet, inner transformation, her identity evolves. She is no longer defined by what hurt her or by what she carries. She becomes defined by what God is forming within her. Pain stops being a limitation and becomes a catalyst. And even though the journey remains demanding, she senses that something greater is being prepared, something she will understand more clearly as she steps into the next stages of what God is unfolding in her life. As the transformation unfolds inside her, another question begins to rise quietly in her heart, a question she has been afraid to put into words. Why does God allow her to carry so much? Why does He place so many responsibilities on her shoulders, responsibilities that often seem heavier than what others around her ever have to bear? It is a question born not from doubt, but from honesty, from a desire to understand the purpose behind the weight she carries. And in the stillness of her spirit, she begins to sense an answer forming, not in the way she expected, but in the way only God can reveal truth. She starts to understand that responsibility is not a punishment. It is a sign of trust. God entrusts weight to those He knows can carry it not alone, but with Him. Her responsibilities, as overwhelming as they sometimes feel, are not random. They are connected to the influence she carries, the resilience she has developed, and the destiny God is shaping through her life. Many people desire purpose, but few are willing to hold the weight that purpose demands. She has been chosen to hold that weight not because she is the strongest, but because God intends to reveal His strength through her. Responsibility also becomes a mirror, reflecting parts of her identity she might never have discovered otherwise. The weight forces her to access deeper layers of patience, compassion, discipline, and wisdom. Responsibility stretches her beyond the limits she believed she had, pushing her into a version of herself she never imagined she could become. And while the process is demanding, she begins to see that what God allows her to carry is also what grows her, shapes her, and elevates her. The weight reveals her capacity, and the capacity reveals her calling. There is another truth hidden within these responsibilities. They teach her spiritual dependence. If her life were light and effortless, she would have no reason to seek God with the intensity that shapes her soul. The weight drives her to prayer, to discernment, to surrender. It builds her sensitivity to God's guidance because she cannot afford to rely on her own understanding. Responsibility becomes the place where intimacy with God deepens because she recognizes that she cannot sustain herself. And every time she reaches the end of her strength, God meets her with His. In this realization, she begins to see that the weight she carries is not an obstacle to her purpose, but an instrument of it. The responsibilities that press against her spirit are also the very things preparing her for what is coming. She may not fully grasp the scale of her calling yet, but she feels its outline forming, shaped by everything she has endured, embraced, and survived. And as she continues to walk through this process, something within her whispers that the next part of her journey will reveal even more about why God has chosen her to hold what she holds. There are moments when she wonders if she can keep going, if she can continue to carry the pressures, the expectations, and the unseen burdens that life places upon her. Every step feels heavier, every decision more exhausting, every night longer than the last. And yet, in the midst of this fatigue, a quiet realization begins to form deep within her spirit. God is not allowing her exhaustion to weaken her. He is using it to awaken a purpose that she cannot yet see. The very weight that threatens to break her is becoming the instrument through which her destiny is being revealed. Her fatigue teaches her reliance. It teaches her that strength is not simply measured by endurance, but by the ability to surrender fully to the one who sustains her. Each tired moment becomes a classroom, each restless night a sacred workshop where God is molding her character, shaping her discernment, and preparing her heart for responsibilities far beyond what she previously imagined. She starts to understand that exhaustion is not a sign of inadequacy, but a sign that she is being entrusted with more than she could carry, alone, a responsibility only God could equip her to handle. In these moments of deep weariness, she learns to hear God's voice more clearly. The distractions of self-reliance fade, and the whispers of heaven become louder. She begins to notice that the solutions, the guidance, and the strength she so desperately needed are already present, flowing to her through divine channels she could not see before. Her fatigue is not punishment. It is preparation. It is a divine reminder that God's timing is perfect and that He has orchestrated every challenge, every sleepless night, and every moment of strain to reveal layers of her calling she might never have discovered otherwise. The beauty of this process is that she is being refined while still functioning in the midst of it. She is learning that her purpose is not postponed because of her tiredness, but revealed through it. She begins to see that every tear she has shed, every burden she has shouldered, and every sleepless night has been forming a resilience that cannot be manufactured in moments of ease. God is teaching her endurance that strengthens her spirit while illuminating her path, showing her the ways she can hold up the world, not by her own might, but by His sustaining power. And as this truth settles deeper in her heart, she begins to grasp that fatigue itself is a divine signal, an invitation to see beyond immediate struggles and into the eternal purpose God is weaving in her life. She starts to understand that each moment of weariness carries hidden instructions, revealing how she can grow in faith, wisdom, and spiritual authority. And as this understanding rises, she is ready to embrace it, even amidst exhaustion, because she senses the unfolding of something far greater than she could have anticipated, a calling that will transform her trials into testimony. If you have ever felt this kind of divine weariness that carries unseen lessons, share your experience in the comments below. Your story may be exactly what another woman needs to see to recognize that her fatigue is not the end, but a signal of purpose and divine preparation. There is a quiet power that leaves traces unseen, a legacy imprinted not in headlines or applause, but in the subtle ways her influence shapes the lives around her. The woman who carries the world under God's guidance bears marks invisible to most, yet indelible in the spiritual landscape of those she touches. She walks through life with a calm that belies the storms raging inside her, with a smile that conceals the battles fought in silence, and with a heart that nurtures while quietly enduring. These marks are not scars of defeat, but evidence of divine resilience forming in her spirit. Each decision she makes, each burden she accepts, and each responsibility she embraces leaves a spiritual imprint, a testament to the strength that comes not from human capability, but from reliance on God's sustaining power. Even when her presence seems ordinary, the impact she has is extraordinary. She moves through her days with intentionality, knowing that her actions, though unnoticed, can shift destinies, inspire hope, and reflect the divine order at work. Every act of patience, every moment of forgiveness, and every quiet sacrifice becomes a seed planted in the hearts of those who witness her faithfully, even if they do not fully realize it. The invisible marks she carries are also lessons of endurance and empathy. She has learned to navigate life's demands with grace, balancing authority with humility and strength with compassion. Her heart becomes a refuge, a sanctuary for those seeking guidance or comfort, even when her own needs remain unspoken. This duality, the ability to hold both care for others and for herself, is refined by divine influence. God shapes her understanding of responsibility and teaches her that true power often operates quietly, away from recognition and accolades, but with profound and lasting consequences. And within this quiet influence, she develops discernment that surpasses ordinary understanding. She begins to perceive spiritual truths and patterns invisible to others, recognizing the interplay between divine timing and human action. She understands that every challenge faced, every person encountered, and every moment of tension contributes to a larger purpose, a tapestry of destiny that she participates in not by chance, but by divine appointment. Her ability to perceive these subtleties becomes a hallmark of her maturity, a reflection of a spirit trained in patience, faith, and unwavering obedience. Through this process, the invisible marks also teach her humility and reliance. She comes to understand that her accomplishments, her endurance, and even her moments of triumph are not solely hers. They are co-authored by God, whose strength sustains her when her own falters. And in this realization, she grows not just stronger, but wiser, more compassionate, and increasingly attuned to the sacred rhythm that orchestrates her life. These marks, unseen by the world, become the foundation for her spiritual authority and the precursor to the revelations that God will continue to unveil as her journey progresses naturally into what lies ahead. There comes a moment when the woman who has faithfully carried her burdens begins to sense something extraordinary unfolding in her spirit, a revelation that feels both subtle and overwhelming at once. It is not announced with fanfare or immediate recognition. It comes quietly, like the first light of dawn filtering through a stormy sky, bringing clarity and a sense of purpose that she has longed for in the midst of her struggles. She begins to realize that the weight she has carried, the responsibilities she has shouldered, and the sacrifices she has made are not without significance. They have been shaping her for a divine purpose, a mission that extends beyond her own understanding. This revelation often arrives when she least expects it, in moments of stillness, prayer, or reflection, when the noise of the world falls away and she can hear the whisper of God's direction. She recognizes patterns she could not see before, connections between trials and triumphs, moments of pain and opportunities for growth. She begins to see that every difficulty was designed not to break her, but to mold her into a vessel capable of carrying what heaven has prepared. Every closed door, every season of delay, every moment of isolation is reinterpreted as intentional shaping, a divine curriculum teaching endurance, discernment, and spiritual insight. Through this revelation, she develops a deeper understanding of her own identity in God. She sees that her worth is not determined by recognition, success, or the approval of others, but by her alignment with God's purpose and the steadfastness of her heart. She begins to recognize that her perseverance is a testimony, an example for others who are watching, even if they do not realize it. The very trials she once feared have become proof of her faith, her resilience, and her capacity to embrace the divine plan with courage and conviction. She learns that giving up is never an option, because the very persistence that feels exhausting is the mechanism through which God reveals her destiny. And as this understanding deepens, she begins to experience a spiritual awakening, a revelation that expands her perspective beyond immediate circumstances. She perceives that her endurance, patience, and unwavering faith have created space for blessings that could not have arrived without the foundation she has built through struggle. She realizes that the divine purpose behind her trials has always been to prepare her for a role that is far greater than any one challenge she has faced. Her revelation is both comforting and empowering. It reassures her that every step taken in faith, every burden borne with integrity, every tear shed in prayer has been noticed and used by God to prepare her for the extraordinary work ahead. She walks forward now with a sense of clarity, understanding that the path she has traveled, though difficult and unseen, has positioned her for alignment with God's timing. Every hardship, every weight, every moment of perseverance has led her to this point, and she begins to anticipate with hope and faith the unfolding of the next stages of her journey, knowing that God's revelation will continue to guide her into the fullness of what He has prepared. As her journey unfolds, the woman who has faithfully carried her burdens comes to the threshold of understanding a greater story, one authored not by circumstance, not by human hands, but by God Himself. She begins to see that every weight she bore, every moment of exhaustion, every challenge faced in solitude, has been orchestrated to bring her into alignment with a purpose far larger than what she could have imagined. The victories, the trials, the awaiting, all of it has been a preparation, shaping her into a vessel capable of receiving the fullness of what God intended. And now, as the next chapter approaches, she recognizes that her endurance has not gone unnoticed. The prayers offered in silence, the tears shed in secret, the nights spent wrestling with doubt, all are woven into the narrative that God continues to write on her behalf. She sees that her story is not defined by struggle alone, but by the divine reinforcement that allowed her to rise each time she felt she would fall. She begins to understand that every obstacle overcome, every unseen battle, and every responsibility carried has equipped her with wisdom, strength, and compassion that cannot be manufactured. These qualities have become the foundation for the fulfillment of her destiny, the very essence of the role God has designed for her in the lives of those around her and in the unfolding of His kingdom. And as she steps forward, she carries not only the lessons learned from hardship, but also the assurance that every effort, every sacrifice, has been significant and necessary. This moment brings clarity. She is not merely surviving, she is thriving in alignment with God's purpose. The patience she cultivated, the endurance she maintained, and the faith she upheld in times of uncertainty have positioned her to embrace opportunities and blessings that are both transformative and enduring. She sees that her journey was never random, never wasted, and never in vain. God's timing, His orchestration, and His sustaining presence have all combined to prepare her for what she is about to receive. And this understanding fills her with a sense of peace, joy, and anticipation, knowing that the unfolding path ahead is divinely guided and perfectly timed. As she reflects on her journey, she is invited to take intentional steps forward, fully aware that her story is part of a larger narrative that will continue to bless, inspire, and transform. And to those who have followed this message to the end, consider leaving a comment below to share that you have arrived here and to reflect on the ways God has sustained you in your own journey. Perhaps using a phrase like, "I see His hand in my life," or "I am strengthened by His presence." Make sure to like this video to honor the truth revealed, subscribe if you haven't yet, and continue exploring these insights, because there is another message waiting that will deepen your understanding and encourage you to embrace the fullness of what God has prepared. The journey does not conclude here. It flows seamlessly into the next act of divine revelation, and staying connected ensures you continue walking in alignment with what He has written for your life.